where best friends and next-door neighbors, Willow and Lillian, spill the tea on murder, mysteries, and other things that go bump in the night. So get your favorite teacup ready, and let's get into it. Welcome to Cruelty Podcast. This is Lillian, and with me is Willow.
Hi.
I wanted to do a very chipper. That's all the energy I had.
Yeah.
It's gone. It's over.
This episode is rough. This one's rough. This one's
trigger
rough.
warning me.
All the trigger warnings, I really try to keep the details at a bare minimum. But I want to give everybody the respect that they're due. But trigger warnings for sexual assault, sexual violence, sex work, because we're talking about many of the victims were sex workers, torture, descriptions of wounds and crime scenes. Again, I keep it at a minimum, but it's gut-wrenching. It really is.
So pull up, if you're driving, but pull up your Pinterest board of puppies.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'll be doing.
Puppies and kittens.
And what case is this? Because we just didn't even say.
Oh, yeah. So this is part one of the Hillside Stranglers. It's just so much information that I just thought it was necessary to split into two parts. So we'll do the second part next week. But tonight we're just going to be talking about the victims, just strictly from the crimes and the crime scenes.
All right.
And then next week we'll actually go into the details of the killers and all of that. So
sounds good.
Yeah. So we're stationed in Los Angeles. Los Angeles was labeled the serial killer capital of the world in the 1970s and 80s.
Well, ain't that the truth, though?
It really was. It was. And it's like Los Angeles is the city of angels. It was the city of death. Like, those angels were created by a lot of death, by a lot of serial killers. And to say that police had their hands full is an understatement. There were no computers at this time. DNA hadn't been fully discovered yet, and they were working on fiber analysis, fingerprints, and bodies were turning up left and right. There was the Sunset Strip killer, Carol Bundy and Doug Clark, the Toy Box killers, the Freeway killer, the Skid Row stabber, the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, the Toolbox killer, and the Hillside Stranglers, cousins Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono. Given this moniker for the way that they discarded their victims' bodies along hillsides near busy roads, displayed for all to see. At first, detectives thought they were dealing with a singular killer, but it didn't take long for it to be clear that they had at least two people working together to get these victims so effortlessly displayed in the way that they did. Like, usually you would see drag marks or, some sort of struggle. A single person cannot just lift a body like that. But these people were placed nearly without any trace whatsoever. What they did to these young women is very gruesome. So be warned, heed the trigger warnings. I'm not going into detail, like I said, but a lot of these women kind of just get named in a list when talked about, when these two cousins are being talked about. A lot of the focus tends to be on more of like who made them and how they became killers. And, the women tend to be just like place markers or like, points on a timeline. And I just wanted to take a second to really focus on them. Because,
yeah, I appreciate you doing that.
Well, and I have to think about like the time period of Los Angeles and how chaotic it was and how women were scared. Women were, taking up classes and doing all these things to prepare themselves.
Yeah, and they were even like cutting or dyeing their hair based on which serial killer was active at the time.
Right. Women were in defense mode, and history repeats itself.
I can't.
Right now.
I know.
Women are doing the same thing once again, only it's a little different now.
It's just, we don't know who the enemy is. We just know their gender.
It could be anyone, because right now there is a whole huge part of the majority of our country that believe that your body is their choice.
Oh, please try.
Like right now, I as a single female in society right now, I have to be my own bodyguard, just like these women had to do on the streets in the 1970s. We're having to do today.
It's disgusting.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So, Los Angeles in the 1970s, 1977 to 1978. It was just a few months of just absolute chaos. Nowhere was safe and no one was off limits. The Hillside Strangler took a total of 10 lives together, 12 total in just 4 months. And this is their stories.
God, that's almost a spree killing.
Almost. Now, prior to the killings, there were 2 sexual assault victims that happened to escape, which led the cousins to go on their killing spree initially. These were 2 teenage runaways, Sabra Hannon and Becky Spears. We don't know their ages exactly. I've seen it tossed around anywhere from 14 to 16 years old. But again, teenagers, children. Cousins Bianchi and Buono met the 2 girls and forced them into sex work. They were told that they were policemen, showed them fake badges, and took them to an abandoned warehouse where they were allegedly presented to a group of men who these 2 girls were to assume were also fellow officers, and they were waiting there to solicit them. The cousins pimped these girls out for a while until each of them, one by one, were able to make their own escapes. Now, the cousins realized how well this undercover cop gimmick was working, so they continued with that, and it kind of stuck. With their main source of income gone, being pimping out these 2 teenage girls, Bianchi had actually missed payments on his Cadillac, and it ended up being repoed. So they went out looking for more girls to pimp out to make their money back. I did find an article that they ended up finding an unknown teenage girl who ended up living in Sabra's old room. They ended up pimping her out for a short amount of time. I was unable to find her name, her age, or what actually ended up happening to her. She could have been killed. We don't know. We really don't know. Now, the cousins would then go along the streets. They would hire sex workers or just pull over and talk to them, act like they were cops, flash their badge, and coerce them into giving them information on other sex workers in the area, as well as information on Johns, and oftentimes threatening them into handing over John lists or trick lists.
Yeah, that was a common police tactic back then, and it still is to this day.
It really is. Absolutely.
Yeah, and absolutely. I hate it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was common. It was common street practice, especially among undercover cops. And so, which was the case for many Hillside Strangler victims. Now, they didn't kill each and every single one of the sex workers that they talked to. They kind of made their presence known in the community. So all the sex workers knew or thought they knew that they were undercover cops. So you inherently trusted them in a way because they were the law. I mean, you don't trust the law, but you know what I mean? You don't think that they're fucking serial killers.
No.
Right? So, their first victim, 19-year-old Yolanda Washington, had actually talked to them before. She had known them as the local undercover cops patrolling the area. And she had happened to mention to them where she predominantly worked, this particular block of Sunset Boulevard. When her friend Deborah Noah had given the 2 cousins a faulty list of Johns, they couldn't find Deborah. But they knew exactly where to find her friend, Yolanda Washington. Now, Yolanda had her official job listed as a waitress at IHOP, but she really was a sex worker on Sunset Boulevard. She was trying to make ends meet for her infant son. She was really trying hard to take herself off the streets, but honestly, the money's really good, you know? And she was really trying hard.
Yes, I do know. And it is. The money is good, better. It's going to be better than waitressing or working at McDonald's or janitor work. And I've done all of those things.
And when you have to dig yourself out of a hole, take care of yourself and your child,
you'll do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she was, for the record, trying to get herself off the street. She was reaching out to help. One of her friends had actually gotten her in communication with somebody that could help her. And that's one of the saddest parts about this case is many of the sex workers, not all of the victims are sex workers, but many of the sex workers were working diligently to get themselves off the streets, to better themselves. Not saying that living on the streets is a bad thing. Like, whatever you feel safe doing is okay. But
it's notoriously not safe to actually walk the streets and pick up junk.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It wouldn't have been something I had done because I didn't feel safe doing that.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, though, is like that a lot of these women were in the process of getting themselves off of the streets, working really, really hard to do that. Yeah. And they get picked up by the fucking cops or who they think is the cops.
That's even worse.
Yes. Like, who can you trust? A woman by the name of Dr. Lewis Lee was working, or is it Lois? I think it's Lois. Was working with many of the sex workers in LA at the time. Many would end up being victims of the Hillside Stranglers as well as other serial killers in the area. She would go on to establish an organization called Children of the Night in 1979, which is still an ongoing nonprofit that aims to get children, specifically children and teens, off of the streets, out of sex work, into therapy, into housing, and helping pay for their college and getting them, a better future that they couldn't necessarily get themselves. And she is working hands-on with women on the streets. And she was actually the woman that her friend had suggested her and had gotten her in contact with. She had gotten in contact with Yolanda Washington, had set up a meeting with her, had gone to court with her, but Yolanda had already pled guilty to prostitution charges. And so she spent like 10 days in jail. And the day that Yolanda Washington was due to get out of jail, October 17th, 1977, she was due to meet with Dr. Lee, but she was nowhere to be found. She literally left jail, was turning her life around, was trying to get through, the criminal process, pay her dues, make her way out. She leaves jail on foot and is picked up by 2 officers and is never seen again alive. The next day, Dr. Lee received a phone call from Yolanda's friend telling her that her body had been found that morning on a hillside near Ventura Freeway for all to see.
Poor thing.
Yolanda had basically, like I said, just walked out of jail and been rearrested by 2 officers. They allegedly put handcuffs on her, placed her in the backseat of their car, and taken her back to Buono's house, just behind the upholstery shop, tied her up, bound her at the wrist, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her with a ligature. Her body was stripped of all of her clothing and identity. That was thrown in a dumpster behind the auto shop. She was then taken and laid nude on a hill by the highway for everyone to see. Police assumed this was a one-time killing, but unfortunately, this pattern would unform. On November 1st, 1977, the nude body of a 15-year-old Hollywood High School student, Judith Lynn Miller, was found in a flood-controlled channel on a hillside off Alta Terrace Drive in a middle-class neighborhood outside of Los Angeles. One of the nearby homeowners had covered her body with a tarp by the time the police had arrived. It was early morning hours, and the school children were on their way to school. She was very small. She was barely 90 pounds. She had the same marks around her wrists and ankles and throat. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a ligature. She was known to work the 8300 block of Sunset Boulevard near Carney's Diner. She lived at home with her parents, went to school during the day, and worked the streets at night. Judy was last seen on Halloween night, being handcuffed and placed in the back seat of an undercover cop car. She was taken to the upholstery shop, tortured, and strangled to death. 5 days later, on November 5th, a 21-year-old waitress named Lisa Caston was last seen leaving the restaurant where she worked. She was a part-time dancer at a cabaret, but she was not a sex worker or a drug user, so she didn't fit the normal profile. She didn't live on the streets. She had her own car. She had her own place. She wasn't picked off the street like all the other victims. She was actually pulled over on her way home from work. The officers were driving an undercover car, flashed their badges, and said that they were detectives. They handcuffed her, and they said that they were taking her in for questioning. Her nude body was discovered that next morning, laying on a hillside near Chevy Chase Country Club in Glendale. She'd clearly been bound and strangled with ligatures. When her body was wheeled into the coroner's office, they happened to put her right next to the previous victim, Judy Miller, and they just kind of like stood back and looked, and the two bodies looked identical. The marks on their bodies, the bruises, the ligature marks, they looked identical. It looked like a mirror. They knew that this had to have been the same perpetrator. They knew that they had a serial killer on their hands. November 13th, 1977, 12-year-old Dolores, a.k.a. Dolly, Cepeda, and 14-year-old Sonia Johnson stepped off the RTD, the public transport,
Right.
on their way home from shopping in Eagle Rock Plaza. 12 and 14.
I'm just sick.
They were last seen walking up to a car with two men inside. The two men flashed their badges and ordered the girls into the back seat. Their bodies were found a week later.
God.
Their parents had to deal with missing their daughters for a whole week. Their bodies were found by a 9-year-old little boy who happened to be digging through the trash near the Dodger Stadium,
Oh my God.
looking for, like various discards of Dodger, random items, like buried treasure, basically.
Yeah. Poor little thing.
Though they were pretty badly decomposed, the same marks on their wrists, ankles, and neck were very clear. Christina Weckler was a 20-year-old honors student in Pasadena Art Center College of Design. She was a kind and quiet girl. She was loving and smart and bright and talented. She was an artist. Her only downside was that she happened to live in the same apartment complex as Kenneth Bianchi. She wrote in her diary that was later recovered by investigators that her neighbor seemed to be like a used car salesman. Which honestly, if you had a lineup of various men and Kenneth Bianchi was standing there and someone said used car salesman.
He looks like a fucking used car salesman.
That's the only way you can describe this man. Like, that is him. That's him. And just that very small description in her diary would later on put him as one of the suspects, but just like very far down the list, just a possible suspect. She just knew him in passing. He seemed odd, but he seemed normal. Unfortunately, he and his cousin would choose her as their next victim. Christina's nude body was found on November 20th, 1977, 3 days after Dolly and Sonia were found in the trash heap. She had been placed in some bushes near a road in Highland Park. She had the same ligature marks around her wrist, ankles, and her wrist, ankles, and neck. But she also had puncture wounds in her arm. They couldn't figure out what this was for the longest time. They knew she wasn't a drug user. They assumed it must have been some sort of torture.
Yeah, or something used to incapacitate her.
Later tests confirmed that they had injected her with Windex.
What the fuck? You know, though, that
Windex.
Huh? Yeah,
Windex. I'm just astonished.
Well, this is going to sound like completely out of left field, but an 80s movie called The Man with Two Brains of Steve Martin. It's a very funny movie, but there's a serial killer in it that uses Windex. And I am fairly certain
that
they got
makes
it from
sense.
that.
That makes sense. They got a lot of their ideas or whatever from different movies of that time.
Well, either they copied off because I think it's from like 1982.
Oh, okay. It wasn't there yet, but maybe it was the other way around. But
yeah, I think it was the other way around.
Yeah, but still, fuck. That's all I have to say about that. Fuck.
It's just so sick.
My God. 3 days later, again, this is just one after the other, body after body. 3 days later, on November 23rd, 1977, a 28-year-old Scientology student and aspiring actress named Evelyn Jane King, she went by Jane King, was found dead in some bushes near Los Feliz Boulevard off-ramp of the Golden State Freeway. She had gone missing on November 9th after leaving the acting studio. Decomposition had set in long enough that they were unable to tell if she had been sexually assaulted or tortured to a certain degree, but it was at least very clear still that she had been strangled and bound with ligature just like the rest. After her body was found, a task force of over 30 officers were established and the moniker was made. Now, at some point, there wasn't an exact date because there was like this run-in, but at some point during the month of November, during this series of killings, they had almost abducted the daughter of a famous actor named Peter Lorre. His daughter's name was Catherine Lorre Baker later. They stopped her and posed as police officers. They asked her for her ID. Angela Buono happened to recognize the girl's name on her ID and quickly dismissed her and was later like, yo, we couldn't have killed her. She's way too high profile. But she would have been during this series of murders had she not had that last name on her driver's license. For sure. And she didn't know about any of that. She just thought she was being stopped by some officers and was like, let go. She didn't know that those were the two killers until she saw their faces on the news.
That is so fucking scary.
Isn't that fucked?
Yeah, it really is.
Think about how many people came in contact with them. So, a week after Jane King's body was found, on November 29th, 1977, 18-year-old business student Lauren Wagner was found dumped on a hillside off another busy street. She bore the same ligature marks, but she also had burn marks on her hands. Investigators were unsure what these burn marks were, but it had been very clear that she had been tortured. Lauren was living with her parents in the San Fernando Valley at the time. She hadn't made it home that night before. Her car was found parked across the street from her parents' house with the driver's side door open. She was only a few feet away when she was abducted.
My God.
This is in a residential neighborhood.
I was saying that just the brazenness of that.
Her neighbor saw the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, they just don't care.
They just don't care at this point.
They feel invincible, I would say, by this point.
1,000%. And you'll really see that with, I believe the next murder is kind of the one where they really show out and show off. But you can tell that they're building, like their ego is building with each killing that they get away with. And their hatred for women is just so evident. Like, obviously, we'll get into it next week. But they just fucking hate women. They have no respect for them at all. And it's just... it's disgusting. It's revolting. This young woman, this 20-year-old woman, was taken in front of her parents' house. Her car door was still open. The neighbors said that they saw her being abducted or possibly being arrested by two officers in an undercover car. They said that it was two men, one tall and young. The other was shorter with bushy hair, which fits their description perfectly. She heard her cry out, quote, "You won't get away with this," before she was pushed into a car, which quickly sped away. At this point, everyone in the area was terrified. A young woman was just abducted outside of her parents' house. Like, nobody was off limits. Everyone was taking self-defense classes. People were wary of police. Police were wary of other police. Police were suspect of each other. People were even being told, like the news was telling people, especially women, that if they were being pulled over by police, to not listen, to drive straight home, lock themselves inside, and immediately call 911. That all police were suspect to civilians at this time. Like, what the absolute fuck?
And the echoes of this case is that when, like, I was 16, my mom set me down when I first got my driver's license and said, hey,
yeah,
do not pull over if you're in a dark place,
unlit,
even if it's police, even if it's a police car. You go to a gas station where you try and come home.
Go where there's surveillance.
She's like, turn on your hazards and go where you can be seen.
Right.
And I know it's from this case.
Yeah.
That my mom, because my mom was like a young woman in the 70s.
Right. And didn't she live over there?
No, but my aunt did.
Oh, yeah, that's
my
right.
aunt
Yeah.
lived in Hollywood
That's right.
and in Santa Monica.
Mm-hmm.
So
she was there for this.
she was. She lived there at the time this was happening.
Yeah, so a lot of women were taking self-defense classes. They were gearing themselves up. They were suspicious of everyone. They weren't walking the streets alone. If they were sex workers, they were working together. Or a lot of women, like the next victim, was trying to change the game of sex work. So they started doing more call work, like from, like call girl work. And
which is what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Where you work through an agency and you
I
feel more protected.
Internet ads, but yeah, I mean,
right. At this time, they didn't have that.
You had to go with an agency if you wanted to be a call
right,
girl, for sure.
Right. 17-year-old Kimberly Martin had decided to join this call girl agency to keep herself better protected, but unfortunately, she answered the wrong call. Bianchi and Buono used a payphone at the Hollywood Public Library to place an order for a call girl, and Kimberly happened to be the one to answer that call. When police arrived to the address that she had been called to, they found that it was an apartment that had been vacant for some time and had already been broken into several times over. Her deceased nude body was found on December 14th, 1977, on a steep hill. Very steep hill, almost fucking vertical, overlooking all of downtown Los Angeles. Hundreds, if not thousands of people making their morning commute to work saw her naked body displayed, strung out like a 5-point star, almost as if it were plastered like a billboard for everyone to see.
They did that to humiliate her.
To shock people, to say, look what I can do, with her ligature marks all over her body, the signature of her killer. To me, it was almost like a graffiti artist tagging a building. It was saying, look at me, the Hillside Strangler. Now, prior to this death, they had just gotten their moniker. So it was almost to say, hey, I see the newspapers. Hillside Strangler, I really like it. Oh, it's so fucking sinister.
Sorry, it's bad
so
radio.
fucked.
I just gave Willow a gross face.
It's so fucked.
It is fucked.
She was only 17. 20-year-old Cindy Hudpath came to Buono's upholstery shop to get her car worked on. Bianchi happened to come into the office just in time to catch a glance of her. He pulled his cousin aside and said, basically, oh, she's next.
Oh, fuck.
Her body was found the next day on February 17th, 1978, when a helicopter pilot noticed her orange car abandoned halfway down a cliff in Los Angeles Crest Highway. Her nude body was stuffed in the trunk of the car. She had the same ligature marks, same signs of sexual assault and torture. She had been strangled before her body was put into her car and crashed off the cliff. Now, again, this was in February. This was a month after the last killing, and it had literally been at least one killing per week up until then. They took a month off. They have another killing. It's a little different than before, but same signature, ligature marks. And with this crime scene, it was more than evident that they were working with two people. This was two killers because somebody had to have driven her car in order to get it off the cliff, and someone had to have driven away because this was up on the side of a mountain. This was in the middle of nowhere. Someone would have seen him walking. Someone would have seen something, but there was nothing. And so they felt like with this crime scene, they got this much closer to figuring out who the Hillside Stranglers were. But after this, it goes silent. Nothing happens. Los Angeles is just quiet. And then a year later, on January 11th, 1979, up in Bellingham, Washington, two women went missing. Karen Mandick, age 22, and Diane Wilder, age 27, were roommates and best friends living in Bellingham. Karen worked at the local Fred Meyer's grocery store, where a new security guard, Kenneth Bianchi, had just started working.
God.
The roommates had a side hustle gig that they had going of house sitting. I've done it a million times, and I've had house sitters a million times. It's fairly normal in our town. And so they had been called to a new gig, a really random gig, a 2-hour house sitting gig, which to me, from the outside looking in from a perspective, seems very fucking odd, seems very fucking suspicious. Why does a house need to be looked at for 2 hours? Unless you're going to receive an Amazon package, which they did not have back then. You know what I mean? Like, why can't your house be vacant for 2 hours? But this was an easy $100 a piece. And in 1979, $100 for 2 hours sounds pretty fucking good. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good for me
right
now.
Yeah. Shit. So Karen decided to go to work and just take a 2-hour lunch break instead of a 1-hour lunch break, go do the 2-hour house sitting gig, and then go back to work. Everything seemed fine, but she didn't return back to work. The next day, the 2 girls were found dead inside of Karen's hatchback in Bellingham, Washington. They were strangled with a ligature. They were sexually assaulted and killed before being redressed and dumped at a separate location. The moment police saw that they had worked with Kenneth Bianchi and traced him back to Los Angeles, and with the bodies having the same exact ligature marks as the Hillside Stranglers, they brought Bianchi into the station, and he eventually ended up spilling everything and so much more, which we will be getting into in next week's episode. But yeah, we just really needed to take a really good moment to sit with
each one,
the victims.
Yes,
sit with them, sit with the terror that the community went through, because the victims are obviously extremely important,
yes,
but all of the potential victims, the community, the women that had to live through this, the people that had to see these women and frankly children displayed on their way to work, the children that had to see these bodies on their way to school. Like, the entire community were victims of the Hillside Stranglers and many of the other serial killers at this time. But a lot of these victims tend to, again, be swept under the rug, be part of just a name on a list with some dates that don't go remembered. And each one of these victims were just
better than that.
They were cut so short. They had so much to give. Each one of them was so loving and so caring and so young. And it was just so senseless. And they trusted these people. They trusted these people to withhold the law. You know what I mean? Uphold the law.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just, it's fucking creepy is what it is. It's just creepy. And I can just imagine having the sheer panic and terror of a serial killer going around. You see a police officer and you feel relieved.
I don't.
Well, no, but you know what I mean.
Back then,
yes.
Yeah.
You see a police officer,
unless
you
were a person
nobody's
of
going
color
to kill me in front of a cop, right?
Exactly. Unless you're a person of color, they didn't trust the police back then
no,
either.
And
rightfully so.
No, and you shouldn't today, but no. Yeah, it's.
I just watched a video of a Oklahoma City police officer slamming a 72-year-old man into the ground.
I can't watch those videos.
I have to.
I feel every ounce of pain that I see, and it's just terrifying.
Just how can you? Or in Independence, Missouri, police officer responded to like a domestic call. The mother was armed with a knife, so he shot her and her baby, her 6-month-old daughter, dead.
And they get nothing.
They get nothing.
They get fucking nothing.
Fucking pieces of shit. Sorry, y'all. I get pissed. I get hot.
Right.
Hot under my collar.
And when the oh shit, I forgot their names now. I just did their case a couple weeks ago. But when the 2 brothers shoot their parents because they're scared that their parents are actually going to kill them, they get life in prison. Menendez brothers. But a cop shoots a baby point blank and he gets paid time off. Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, just so you know, fuck the police.
Hey, Cap.
Yeah.
Even your uncle.
Yeah.
Even
Especially
your
uncle.
Even your brother.
Yeah, this isn't.
Even your dead grandpa.
We don't.
Fuck you.
Yeah, we don't bleed blue.
Not fuck you, but whatever.
Fuck the police.
Fuck the police. So, business time. Patreon's very exciting right now because there's a new feature.
Yeah.
Which is where you're going to be able to buy individual Patreon episodes. I'm right now working on a list with links of all the episodes that we've done for Patreon that have not been released to the public ever. And I will go through and, you'll be able to purchase them individually if you're interested. It'll be in a pinned post at the top of our Patreon page. Give me about a week to do that because it's a lot of work. Because we have like 300 episodes or something.
Whole bunch.
It's over 600 hours of content. Altogether. It's a lot. I also am working on my next Patreon episode. I just did Ruby Ridge. I am doing the Columbine High School shooting next.
Dear God.
And the Waco Massacre.
Combined?
Not combined.
Oh, okay.
Different days.
Gotcha.
So that's what's coming up. Also, you'll be able to soon, within like a week or two, commission us to cover a case on Patreon. And in that commission, part of the price is you get to listen to it, even if you're not a patron. So you get access.
Oh, that's fucking cool.
That is fucking cool.
That is fucking cool.
So you can pick any case, even a case I've said I won't do. I will do if you pay me. I'm slutty like that. But other than that, I don't really have a lot of business time. I have long COVID, likely. I can barely sit up. Like, I'm trying not to fall asleep right now. I can, be awake for 2 hours at a time, and I am literally done. My fatigue and brain fog is so intense. I'm just barely home. I just feel like shit. So if I've ignored a message, I'm not ignoring. I'm just not well. And I've been really depressed. Like, my car wouldn't start today. And poor Willow, she's working so hard, and she's going to have to haul my stupid ass around again.
Walmart's like 30 minutes away, so...
That's an hour of her fucking time she don't have to help my dumb ass out. So if you want to help my dumb ass out, there will be links in the description of this
My
podcast.
car needs an alignment, and I'm just driving bitches everywhere.
If you want to help both of our dumb asses out, we would appreciate it.
It sounds like a tin can rusted and dented going through space. Like, it's
no good. It's a rattling bitch. Yeah. I can hear her.
She weighs about 12 pounds, and she's just...
and then mine's like, put. And we both pass each other, and it's so noisy. People at the Dollar General call my car the Bee.
I can hear you coming. I can hear you coming through my house.
Because I have an aftermarket... race car car.
We got our cars off Temu.
Fuck, it's what we had to do.
AliExpress. Express me a hatchback.
It was stressy, depressy, upsetty spaghetti.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you're listening on YouTube, we've gotten a bunch of subscribers recently. Thank you so much. I love you.
Yeah.
If you're not subscribed, please, it's the best way to support us there. Just subscribe, comment. Even if I don't answer you because I'm dying currently, I really appreciate it. But if all you can do to support this podcast and us is listen, remember that's the whole reason we did it in the first place.
Yeah. And we appreciate
And spread the word. It's free. That's how you help for free.
Yeah. Tell your friends.
Tell a friend. Share it on Spotify to your friends.
Be like, I know a spooky bitch.
Yeah. And our merch, I've designed new merch. It will be up in about a week.
Yay.
It is the Maris Monday merch where he's getting abducted by a UFO and an alien who is chuffing hella doinks.
Doinks.
Yeah.
What are doinks?
It's joints, idiot.
Oh.
I can't. I gotta go. Hey, I love you guys very much. Thank you, as always.
Bye.
Us on your social media platform of choice. Linktree/Cruelty has all of the links. Check out our Patreon for exclusive episodes, merch, ad-free episodes, live ghost hunts, and much more. Please be sure to subscribe. New episodes are uploaded weekly. Thank you so much. See you next time. Music and production by Willie B.